Okay, everybody, today I want to go over Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. Before I do, again, welcome back to Lucid Literature, a video podcast combination, if you will, that is geared towards my English 1102 class at Young Harris College. So again, y'all, please be checking in if you are on this Saturday. It is snowing in Asheville where I live. Welcome. And so I want to go over The Fall of the House of Usher, specifically looking at foreshadowing in The Fall of the House of Usher. Now, like all of Poe's short stories work, this can be a difficult story, especially if you're not used to reading, mid-19th century American literature. The syntax can be confusing, the allusions, not illusions, but allusions, although there are illusions in the story, Illusion. What I'm talking about are allusions, Allusion, which are references, historical, cultural, political references that can foreshadow what is to come and be metaphorical as well. So I want us to break down in this short video 3 examples of foreshadowing, and hopefully this will help you understand what's going on. Now, the plot of the story, we have a speaker visiting a childhood friend who he doesn't quite know very well, but they did know each other in childhood, and he interestingly says that he doesn't quite remember a lot from childhood, which is fascinating, and he doesn't remember their interactions, but he goes to his friend's manor. The Ushers are famous, wealthy people in this story, in the story's landscape, and they live in this mansion, this kind of almost like Resident Evil type mansion. And he visits his friend Roderick Usher, and he spends a couple days there and finds out that Roderick is suffering from some kind of malady. Refers to him as a hypochondriac a number of times, but it's clear that Roderick is suffering from some kind of paranoia, some kind of psychotic break, etc. And interestingly enough, the Roderick's mental state and his health is made manifest in the state of the mansion. We get a sense that it is dilapidated, almost falling apart. There are beautiful aspects, but the beautiful aspects are often overshadowed by some of the more macabre and dark facets of the mansion. And, going forth, he eventually, realizes that Roderick is indeed having some kind of psychotic break after, listening to him read poetry and songs and going over books and seeing him paint, and seeing his twin sister Madeline, who he sees briefly, the speaker sees briefly, and doesn't see again until she reappears as an apparition after having been buried alive by Roderick, right? So that Roderick buried his twin sister alive. He seems to have known that he did this, might be a cause of his psychotic breakdown. Or he might have always been somewhat mad, and this madness led him to do this heinous act. But at the end, Madeline comes back as an apparition, and she kills Roderick, and the speaker flees the house, and as he does, the house just completely crumbles, right? So the house crumbles, which becomes a metaphor for the crumbling of the Usher family name and the literal death of the Ushers involved. So I want to talk about foreshadowing and how we know this death is coming early on in the story. So foreshadowing is just words, phrases, images, allusions that point to something that's going to happen in the story. So the first bit of foreshadowing is almost immediate, right? During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens. Okay, so the words dull, dark, the adjectives dull and dark give us a sense that the landscape is dull and dark. There is a deathly presence here. The house, may be haunted. It may be, spooky or mystical. But whatever it is, there's something oppressive in the air, something deadly, something deathly. And so what I want you to pay attention to is just the early descriptions of the landscape and the house. Things are not what they appear. Right? The speaker goes on, "It was possible, I reflected, that a mere different arrangement of the particulars of the scene, of the details of the picture, would be sufficient to modify, or perhaps to annihilate its capacity for sorrowful impression." And acting upon this idea, I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn, which is just a mountain lake. That's going to be important, though, that lay in unruffled luster by the dwelling, and gazed down. So he's looking into this water, but with a shudder even more thrilling than before upon the remodeled and inverted images of the gray sedge and the ghastly tree stems and the vacant and eye-like windows. Okay, so we get, the house. He's looking at it in a different way, and the house is gloomy, and the house is also personified, eye-like windows, which is going to be important when we think about the connections between Roderick's downfall and the house's destruction, right? In what ways is the house a personification of Roderick? Well, in obvious many ways. So look at the way that the landscape is portrayed. We get an idea that something is going to be really, really, really bad. It's going to happen to this house and the occupants inside, just based on the gloominess and death and the sinister nature of the adjectives and the images used. Okay, so one, pay attention to the descriptions of place, like we did before. Especially this fissure, which extends from the roof of the building in front, making its way all the way down the wall in a zigzag direction. Okay, so that's important too. There's a big fissure in the wall. Again, lets you know about the house's fragmentation. Also fills us in on the fragmentation that's going to happen in terms of Roderick himself, this break from reality, this fragmented sense of self, and his ultimate destruction, as well as his twin sister Madeline's. So we go down, and again, read the story slow. It again, can be quite difficult. We go down, there's a lot more to unpack here in terms of foreshadowing. The speaker sees Madeline, and Roderick says, "Oh, that will be the last time you see her alive," or something like that, to that effect, which again is an example of foreshadowing. We know that Madeline is going to die. We can infer that. Something else which would be interesting, and I don't know too much about this, but we can see foreshadowing in some of the cultural allusions. They mention a lot of artwork and literature, some of it fact, some of it fictional and made up. Among other things, I hold painfully in mind a certain singular perversion and amplification of the wild air of the last waltz of von Weber. Now, von Weber, composer, I don't know much about von Weber, but it is a bit of foreshadowing. It's an illusion. It might be interesting to look into that. Okay. So we go down. The second bit of foreshadowing that I want us to pay attention to is Roderick's song that he composes and sings, called The Haunted Palace. Now, what's interesting about The Haunted Palace, this raises the question of the nature of art. Do we make art in response to reality, or does reality emanate from art, right? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Does art come before reality, or does reality come before art? In other words, is art mimetic? Does it mimic what's going on in reality, or does reality mimic art? It's an interesting philosophical question, and I say that because what's going on in this poem is happening in real time to or will happen to Roderick and the speaker. All right, and so it's a meta text, and what I mean by meta text, it's a story within a story that is conveying what's going on, right? In the song, in the poem, if you will, and a window is described, and in the poem, people can see inside of the window, two people inside. Well, that's exactly what's going on in the story, right? We have two people in a room, which you could see through a window. You could see them through a window. We get down here to stanza 5. But evil things in robe of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Okay, that's a clear foreshadowing of what's going to happen. That's exactly what happens in the story. An evil thing, in the form of Madeline in robes of sorrow, does assail the monarch, Roderick's high estate, and brings it down. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall upon him desolate, and round about his home. Okay, there we go. The glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. So I want you to go back and really pay careful attention to these stanzas, these 6 stanzas, because it is a clear example of foreshadowing. The Haunted Palace is the House of Usher. Okay, and we're back. Sorry about that. The video recording software that I am using only allowed me to do 10 minutes because I didn't sign in. But anyway, sorry about that. I'll upload both these videos, but this can be considered part 2. All right. So again, pay attention to what is going on here, especially. All right. Finally, the third bit of foreshadowing that I want us to pay attention to, the most important part, is this story, The Mad Tryst of Sir Lancelot Canning, which the speaker takes up and reads, and as he's reading it, he's realizing that the same things that happen in the story are happening in real time in the tale, right? So he's reading about this person named Ethelred who, bust into the king's room and destroys the king, who is a dragon, etc. And then there's a collapse of the structure. And what's important, this is exactly what's going on, right? Now, if we read Ethelred, Ethelred, 8 letters, 3 syllables, Ethelred, it's exactly parallel to Madeline, Madeline, right? So there's a parallel. Ethelred as Madeline, Madeline as Ethelred, the dragon as Roderick. Okay, so go through and read this. Ethelred is considered the hero of this tale, right? Is Madeline the hero? We don't get much of Madeline, but perhaps she is the more noble twin. We think of the dichotomy, the good twin, bad twin. We see this theme play out especially in Native American literature, especially the Iroquois creation myth, things like that. This idea of a duality, dichotomy, is ever present between one good side and one bad side, and we do get this with Madeline and Roderick, possibly. But nevertheless, we get what's happening in this story within a story. The Ethelred story is exactly mirroring what's happening in real time. And Ethelred uplifted his mace and struck upon the head of the dragon, which fell before him. So we get Madeline, coming from up high, almost like an apparition, and attacking Roderick, which fell before him and gave up his pesty breath with a shriek so horrid and harsh and withal piercing that Ethelred had feigned to close his ears with his hand against the dreadful noise of it, the like whereof was never heard before heard. All right, and then the speaker, after seeing all of this, seeing Madeline come down on Usher, as if in the super energy utterance there had been found the potency of a spell, the huge antique panels to which the speaker pointed threw slowly back upon the instant. Their ponderous and ebony jaws was the work of a rushing gust, but then without those doors there did stand the lofty and enshrouded figure of the Lady Madeline of Usher. Woo! There was blood upon her white robes, and the evidence of some bitter struggle upon every portion of her emaciated frame. She was buried alive. For a moment she remained trembling and reeling to and fro upon the threshold, then with a low moaning cry fell heavily inward upon the person of her brother. So just like Ethelred bringing the mace down on the dragon, and in her violent, now final death agonies bore him to the floor a corpse, and a victim to the terrors he had anticipated. All right, and anticipated, right? So he, again, we go back through, he anticipates his own death. Death is ever present, so please keep noticing that. And then finally the speaker runs to the house, and it collapses, that zigzag at the beginning, that penultimate moment of foreshadowing. We know things ain't right. We know things are going to collapse. We know things are going to fragment from the very beginning on the story, and it just keeps going on from there. So, boom. All right, everyone. Again, sorry for the breakup in the videos here. Hopefully this explains things a bit clearer. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will catch y'all next time when we discuss the Mask of the Red Death. Peace.